I'd like to acknowledge, obviously, distinguished guests and people who are here, and of course the traditional owners of this country. I'm on a work visa from the lower southwest. My family doesn't come from this country, so it's really important for us to acknowledge the mob who are from this land as the traditional owners, the Nyungars from this country. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Hendy Cowan. I warned him that I was going to do this. As a member of government a number of years ago, Mr. Cowan was instrumental in putting in place an Aboriginal Economic Development unit and process. That unit doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but the legacy of it is very strong and continues and has done a great deal across the state, because it was a different perspective, a different way of looking at things, which actually sparked off a lot of really positive things. So I'd like to give you a special acknowledgement for that. Just a little bit of background about me. So I'm the CEO of the South West Land and Sea Council. I also grew up on a farm in the southwest. My parents are farmers, beef farmers just out of Pemberton and Mandurah. I went to Murdoch University. We've had where I came runner-up recently in a Distinguished Alumni Award, ironically, to a girl who I convinced to go to Murdoch University as well. But she was a champion student and an even better individual, so that's well deserved. I've been in this position for 9 years now, which is a fairly long stretch of time, and have been engaged in particular with the state over the last 5 years with negotiating a global native title settlement across the southwest of WA. And we've tried to achieve a fairly comprehensive agreement which looks at things in different ways, I suppose, and I'll come to that a little bit in a little while. The place where I wanted to start, though, was, I guess, a little bit of a sense of place from a Nyungar perspective of here, of Mandurah and the surrounding areas. So there's a lot of water. We have the hills just a little way away, the inlets, the rivers, the lakes and the wetlands. Now, traditionally, this place here is and was and remains one of the most significant gathering places for Nyungars across all of Nyungar country, where the trail would finish for the initiates, where initiation ceremony would occur, where marriage took place, where people gathered together for religious and cultural ceremony, and basically where families gathered. But of particular significance there is that it's a place where initiates would finish their journey, and those ceremonies would occur to initiate young fellas into manhood. And the reason that happened here is because it's such a rich landscape, because there's so much in it. The waterways, the wetlands, the environment of this place is genuinely extraordinary. And as a result of that, and as a result of that occurring for tens of thousands of years, this landscape is full of Nyungar values, of places, of sites of significance, and of locations where particular things have occurred. Now, that still survives. The reason that I can talk about it, even though only in a very brief summary, is because those values are here still today. And that knowledge is still here today. And there are movements within the Nyungar community to reinvigorate and to re-establish those ceremonies in and around places like Mandurah. And that can be done because, while many people may not sort of know or guess this, the ceremonies are still known, and the songs still exist. And so this place here is a really, really important locality in, I guess, the pantheon of Nyungar country and connection to country and what it actually means to Nyungar people and culture more broadly. So in light of that, and on the flip side, we have, and as we've talked through this morning, the area is undertaking massive growth. There's a very, very high population increase. There's an increasing urban footprint and various things like that going on. And Nyungars who, over the last, almost 2 centuries, have been pushed to the fringes, look at this with mixed feelings. One of the feelings that people feel because of the very, very great cultural significance of this area, is despair that all of these really, really important places are being slowly covered over, just very slowly taken up, and I guess that's accelerating more and more now. And so people are both on the fringe and are powerless to protect the things that they value. At the same time, though, there's a realisation that, look, the world is the way that it is. And in all honesty, the Nyungar community, or we as a community, need to participate in the prosperity, or need to have a stake in the prosperity of the land as it exists, or as it's being developed. But more than that, to try to shape the way that the place is developing so that it is respectful or cognizant, or whatever the term might be, of these values. So the key aspiration of people is not to be on the fringe. The key aspirations of the Nyungar community is just a normal human thing, to be able to prosper and have a stake in the prosperity of the region, to be culturally secure, and to be able to express culture and cultural values freely. Now that might sound a little bit esoteric, but it's really no different to people who are religious and want to be secure in their beliefs and have places to go to get that security and to be able to express those things. People want to be healthy, well-educated and employed, because employment, at least according to me, has a very important cultural function as well. And I'll get onto that in a little bit further. So obviously the region has incredible potential. People want to participate and belong. There's some extraordinarily high Nyungar values in the area, and we want to participate in the way that the region develops. Now, Nyungars share the environmental values that have been spoken about this morning. Not only share, but really, want to work hard with people to try and make sure that those values are kept in mind and preserved when the footprint of this region expands. And it's great to see that these things are being celebrated and protected. We think that's a wonderful thing. But it's not the same for Nyungar heritage values. And this point is exactly why I started with an illustration of the cultural significance of this place. Because while in general, the Nyungar community and generally the community at large will share and celebrate and seek to preserve and design around environmental values, the same can't be said for Nyungar cultural values or Nyungar cultural heritage values. And that's a great shame. So rather what we often have is conflict. Now, around heritage is really the only place where people have any power or ability to exert power. And so people will often be mischievous in those, I guess, interactions with people. But when you put on the fringe, you try and hook onto something where you might have some influence. But the heritage values, they tell a really important story about our shared history, right? They tell a really important story about the land and the landscape, and they tell a really important story about the place and the region. It's, from our perspective, it's the bedrock of culture, and of course, we're not going to let go of that. But this culture contains ideas and values that everyone would benefit knowing and sharing. So the point of this little part of my talk is to say that while environmental values are very well respected and looked after by the general population, what we would like to see is that the Nyungar cultural values and Nyungar cultural knowledge is afforded an equal footing. And that's not to say that, what we say is what you have to do. What I'm saying is that we want people to understand and to share those values along with the Nyungar community. Culture contains these really interesting values and ideas, and they can actually be incorporated into everyday life in really interesting ways. Urban layout, architectural and built form, in sustainable development. Importantly, and I think this is one of the points that we might want to talk about in relation to the development of the region, the sense of place of the region and how it develops, and the sense of place of all the people who live in it. Because those cultural values are unique and very special. So the region, and Mandurah in particular, could be a satellite CBD, because it's apparent to me that that's pretty much the way that things are going to develop. And it could be just a building block like happened in the Perth metropolitan area and just be a bit of a carbon copy of that. Or it could be a region and a place which is special and unique and has itself embedded in a sense of place of the country and incorporates these Noongar cultural values in order to make it unique and have that sense of place. But it requires something a little bit special. The best example that I can come up with at this point in time is happening right now, and that's the engagement that we've received from the Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority on Yagan Square. So the Premier earlier this year, and I applaud him greatly for this, it was sort of came out of the blue for me, announced that the major civic square in Perth was going to be called Yagan Square. Now, that's wonderful, but of course the next question is, well, that's good, you name it after a fairly well-known Noongar fella, but what happens next? The Metropolitan Regional Development Authority have engaged in a process of which sets the benchmark of how to engage people, their knowledge, their values and their systems in creating, in this case, a built form which reflects it. And it will have such an extraordinary sense of place that when you go there, you'll look around and you'll see all of these symbols of heritage and culture embedded within the built form and the way that that square works. They've even gone so far as to incorporate the Noongar 6 seasons to describe the phases of the project and the project development. So what they've done is something very, very special, and what they'll create is something which is very, very special as well. And you'll see it. You'll see it. There's no reason why that can't and shouldn't happen in the development of this region as well, because you're sitting on one of the most significant places in Noongar country. There's no reason why the built form, the planning, the architecture of Mandurah and the region couldn't also reflect these values and just be embedded with a sense of place and be visually known and seen to be unique and worthy of being proud of. So moving on from that, as I've mentioned, that we actually want to participate and have a stake in the prosperity of the region, or particularly the people from this country. But we have a very different population profile, and that is a very young one. A lot of people under the age of 18, probably about half the population, possibly more. Therefore, for the Noongar community, education, inclusion, employment, early childhood support, and I'll repeat that again because it's so important, early childhood support, school retention and youth employment are key and critical aspects of the development of this region for the Noongar community. Particular and specific strategies are required to accomplish these things within the Noongar community. A general sort of process can't be adopted because it won't work, because people come at it from a different perspective in their lives. So what we're doing to move towards wrapping up in my organisation is to do this native title settlement, which is a global settlement across the southwest. It does some pretty radical stuff in relation to the native title claims, in that it surrenders native title. But we believe that it's worth it because that's a very marginal set of rights, and in exchange there's a fairly comprehensive set of package of benefits. It creates a very, very different scenario for achieving some of these things that I've talked about. The first thing that it does is that it contains a very, very different economic model, and that rather than trying to pull something out of the bottom of projects as they come up, we can all of a sudden become equity stakeholders. So we have a stake in the prosperity of the region. I'm over time, so I've got to wind up in about 1 minute. There'll be land for development and joint venture partnerships. We'll be investing in culture and cultural invigoration, and we'll be developing a very powerful interface, a corporation, which will be able to interface with the world at large, and that's going to be the site where a lot of these things happen. Unemployment, and I want to finish on this point because I want to issue a bit of a challenge, and that is that unemployment is far, far higher in the Nyungar community than in the general community. There's only one major employer in the region with a Nyungar employment strategy that's becoming effective, and that's Newmont Boddington Gold, who we have a representative who was here but now isn't here. Oh, sorry, there he's sitting next to me. Brother. Now, this has had its troubles on the way through, but continuously the company has searched for solutions, and it has shown its commitment to this, and it's starting to emerge. This isn't replicated with any other major employer in the region, to my knowledge. There are platitudes, there are intentions stated, but there's no attention given to the special and unique strategies that are required for employment of Nyungar people, with the exception of Newmont Boddington Gold. And so the challenge that I would like to leave you with is, we want to have a share in the prosperity of the region. That means all of those things that I talked about, and importantly, employment. So all of you people who are employers and work in big companies, and we have a few people here, it's time to actually bring action to the good words that have been spoken, using the model of Newmont Boddington Gold, and actually applying tenacity and the unique and special strategies that it requires, because that will actually, in the end, be what bridges the gap. Employment has a lot of benefits socially, culturally, not only for the community, health-wise and education, but benefits us all generally. Thank you very much for your indulgence and enabling me to go a little bit over time. Well, you didn't, I just did. So with that, thank you.